So my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2016. I was 19 years old in my sophomore year of college. Kind of hard to say is when it really kind of started for him, because it's one of those things that kind of creeps up and you don't always really know what symptoms are until they increase in frequency and things like that. So we had some suspicions, or rather my mom had, for several years, but that's when they took him to get tested and it was confirmed that he had Alzheimer's. And all throughout that time leading up to and during, he had difficulty holding jobs and had a lot of kind of emotional outbursts and was forgetting things and stuff like that. So when he got diagnosed, it was in some ways like a really good confirmation for some of the stuff that we had been experiencing. But then also it's kind of hits you with the inevitability of this is an incurable disease. Yeah. So being only 19 was hard for me to process what was going on and really just the magnitude of it. So my dad was able to stay home with our care and supervision until 2018. And during that time, you know, he struggled getting around a little bit, would get a little confused and turn around. But with that disease, there's a lot of plateauing and doing well and then dipping down and then plateauing there. And so it kind of goes in these steps. So it's around that time that we realized he needed more professional help and he needed to be in a home. So that year we put him into an assisted care living facility and he stayed there for about a year. He did pretty well there for the most part. That was a whole adjustment for my family because, you know, now we're going to visit my dad somewhere that's not home. Mm-hmm. He knows that he's not home. He knows he can't go home, but he would still ask us, like, can I go home with you guys today? And we would have to say no. And honestly, at certain points, it started to feel better the more he forgot and wasn't aware of where he was, because we could kind of like trick him, which is not a really natural or good feeling, especially with your father or just any family member. So I remember we would have to say, oh, let's go check out this in this community area, and then be like, oh, you remember this aide? Why don't we go talk to them? And then while he was talking to them, we would have to like kind of skirt out quietly and leave in that manner. Yeah. Just so that there wouldn't be a lot of commotion every time. So he was there for about a year before he had another dip, and he started to display some more aggressive symptoms, which is really common due to like confusion and just agitation. So he had to get put into a skilled nursing facility the following year. And I remember that day being a really difficult day because, first of all, it was like right around Thanksgiving, and they told us that he couldn't stay there anymore because of his aggressive behavior. So we needed to move him out like that week. We had like no time. It was very quick. And I remember we found the facility. It was like 30 minutes away from where he was originally. So we drove him there. And I remember it being the last time that we were ever with him outside.
Wow. This was 2019 at this point?
Yeah, 2019. And it was winter time. I remember we went to this park nearby that we used to go to growing up, and it was snowing, and we had a snowball fight. And it was this really beautiful memory that I had. But thinking back always makes me very emotional and very sad, because that was really the last time that he got to be outside and that we got to be with him, not in a nursing home type setting.
How old was he?
When he passed, he was 63, I believe.
Wow, so he got it really young.
Mm-hmm. We believe his dad also had Alzheimer's, but at that time, diagnosing things like that was a little bit harder. So, yeah, we think it's genetic.
Okay, so 2000, so it was 2016 he was first diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
Then he was in the home for a year after a couple of years of being at home with you guys.
Yeah.
And then you had to move him to this more restricted facility or more care.
Like a skilled nursing facility. And this place was much more like that standard type of hospital setting. And honestly, it was a really depressing place to put him.
I can imagine.
A lot of people much older than him, a few people his age, but it was more rare that people his age got it. So a lot of people much older than him kind of just sitting around and staring into space like all day long. And he was there for about a year before, almost a year to the date, before we got a call. I was at Thanksgiving with my in-laws at the time, and we got the news that he only had potentially a few hours left.
Oh my gosh.
So it escalated very quickly from 2016 to it was fall, winter of 2019.
Holy shit. So you said 19 when you first got diagnosed? In
Yes.
2016. So you were at like this stage in life when you're supposed to be leaving the home and kind of figuring out your next step in your path and to becoming an adult. How was that in contrast to now having this like really heavy thing happening within your home?
It definitely is something that there are limited people that I come in contact with who have experienced that in that order of their life. And so, I spent a good portion I have spent a good portion of my late teens, early 20s, I'm 27 now, just learning how to navigate the grief and that loss. And also it rocks and affects the whole family. And that itself, like our family unit, went through a lot where we've had a lot of closeness while he was sick. But then when he passes away, it's interesting how one person can really bring the family together.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, you kind of like have this lost identity as a family unit for a while.
Yeah.
CJ, you felt that a lot, right?
I did. Yeah. I was going to say that happened. So my wife passed in 2020 and I had my 3 kids. And it was like, we were such a tight unit. And then, it was the same thing. And the kids kind of went off and each grieved in their own way or experienced their grief in their own way. And then obviously I was like consumed with it and trying to deal with it. And it took a good while to where I felt like we were finally like coming back together as a unit again. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one brother. So it's just my mom and dad, my brother and I. And my parents hadn't had the greatest relationship. It was very strained, but I commend my mom and give her so much credit for the ways that she stuck through so much for my dad. And I also acknowledge that like with that internal, like every family has their issues. So all those issues that like you already deal with is like put on hold, and like that's just like not the focus. And you got to come back to that at some point. And that's something that I've also like kind of been picking up and trying to work through afterwards, because it is a big distraction away from everything else that's happening in the family.
What did it look like for you guys to splinter, for that family unit to lose its identity in the beginning? What was its impact on you?
It was really hard because it felt like there were only so many people who knew exactly what I was going through. And it was the people who knew my dad and who knew me really well. And that's mainly my mom and my brother. And so it felt really, it was really difficult because there were times where I felt like I was grieving alone. And I knew that I could talk to them if I was like, hey, I'm like having a hard time, grieving dad. But we're all we're all figuring it out. And so there's only so much that we can help each other because we're all kind of treading water and trying to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
No one has a life raft in that instance, you know?
Yeah, no. It's like you're drowning while trying to build the raft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you living at home?
So, no, I was living with my husband at the time, and my brother is married and living with his wife. And my mom is actually still in the house that we grew up in, and she's held on to it, but she lives alone.
So in the early stages of that grief, then when you were trying to reconcile everything that had happened, especially at that time in your life, what did your early grief look like? What was the impact of it on your life? So you got married. So you got married young, right?
Yes. Yeah, I got married at 20. And I say then husband at the time because I'm now divorced.
Okay.
And I actually went through the divorce only 4 or 5 months maybe after my dad had passed. So I was going through
double grief.
multiple types of loss. But what's so funny looking back is when my dad was going through his different stages of being in homes and being treated and going to appointments and just that sick stage, I was so mentally prepared and I thought I was so mentally prepared and believed that I had time to really grasp how it would feel when it happened. Because I had heard people talk about grief as being like, well, if someone's sick for a long time, when they go, you feel like relief, or you feel like this kind of like it's finally been put to rest and you have this peace or something. And when I think back, the people that have said that about that experience are people that actually aren't going through it at all. It's from the outside. It makes sense in their brains that it would be like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of rationalized it as being, when my dad passes away, I can just kind of like lay him to rest and I'll be able to handle it. But I was not prepared at all for that real feeling of loss.
Yeah, I think it's also like you might have a little bit of relief that he's no longer whoever the individual is, like, is no longer in pain. But then at the same time, like, that relief comes with like guilt for like, oh my God, fuck, like I'd rather them be here. And like they'd probably rather be in pain and be here just to like be here with us.
Yeah.
So, and then it like, then it's like compounded by a million other different feelings that, going through a divorce at the same time, or having children that are going through it and watching them experience it. So it's like, I feel like sometimes we always talk about what not to say.
Yeah.
It's like, I know that it's so well, there's so much good coming from that, but at the same time, you're like, no, like, no, it's not like, yes, I'm happy that they're no longer in pain, but like now I'm here and I'm in pain and I have to like figure out life without them.
I found that the biggest thing I was craving in those early stages of grief was just space to grieve in. And work only gives you so many bereavement days, and you only have so much PTO. And people forget a lot sooner than you do. And it's just how it works. And the difficulty is everything moving along.
And also it's not, I feel like there's been 2 companies, I'm sure there's others, but 2 that have been on my radar that have like launched tech solutions around bereavement and loss and like handling loss. I think there's 2 different angles. One is like really a tool to give employees resources to grieve. Mm-hmm. And the other is more of like a handling like estate and handling all the things that come with when someone dies. We just released an episode with Kennedy and we kind of jokingly said like, it's actually not easy to die in America. Like there's so much shit that comes with it for everyone that is left behind. Yeah. And so you're not only like dealing with like you know, like being obviously like grieving the loss of someone, but you're trying to like deal with remembering their fucking password to like turn off their Verizon service or whatever.
Yeah.
Or T-Mobile, no hate on Verizon. They all follow the same process. But yeah, there's like two companies, I digress, but two companies have really been like shouting in a good way a lot about like bereavement leave, and like 5 days is like not a fucking enough. Like,
Yeah.
No.
how could 5 days be enough? In fact, like literally you need 5 days in order to like be there for the loss,
Yeah.
let alone 5 days to then like plan a funeral and have a funeral and like,
Yeah.
or, you know, do whatever. Like different religions obviously have different ways in which they
Rituals and stuff.
celebrate, or in
Yeah.
rituals. Yeah. I didn't know if rituals was the right word, but so it's kind of, and I will say like some companies are like terrible at it and some companies are not so terrible at it,
Mhm.
you know, like, and I think it's probably like the bigger companies are just shit at it because they can't give any sort of like, they can't like let like Susie do one thing and Melanie do another. So it's like, it's 5 days and that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas smaller companies have a little bit more like, you know, like circumstance, or like maybe you work remote. And I mean, you shouldn't have to like work remote some days, but like at my company, we say that it starts at 5 days and goes from there. Like I forget the exact wording, but because when we started this, I asked our benefits person, and she's like, the policy says that like at least 5 days, but like if you come to us, we are never gonna not give you more time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how it can vary from company to company.
Yeah. And I'm glad that there are some companies that are kind of setting that standard, because it, like you said, the 5 days goes into making arrangements. And
Mhm.
then, you know, in circumstances where you don't have more, you've used up all your days and you're sitting at your desk or you're going into the phone booth and you're having a breakdown
Yeah.
basically every day.
That's like, you're not fully present at work. So actually who's like, no one's benefiting from that. You'd rather like you should just be at home. But like you said, where it moves forward, it's like everyone's like, okay, you had your 5 bereavement days, you're done, right? You're good. Like everyone, I'm grieved, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's like, no, actually it's just setting in. Like this is when it just sets in after the funeral, like that you like almost just force yourself to make it through.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
Then it really sets in,
And
I think.
It hits at such weird times. And I know every person I've talked to who has experienced grief is like, it always hits you when you don't expect it, when it's not the designated time. And I don't think I really cried that much from the day that like he passed till like maybe a week or two after the funeral, because I was very like in game on mode.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the wake and in the memorial service, you're kind of like social. It's like a social event. So you're talking to people and, you know, you're trying to honor that person who's passed away as well and be present and kind of a little bit more on top of things.
It's super hard. I mean, I'd have to like mute my camera in meetings because I'd just like break down.
Yeah.
And you're just like trying so hard to hold it together, and you just can't. But work expects you to continue on.
Yeah.
So you're kind of going through this. You had your lackluster ability to grieve because of work. What was the early stages of you confronting your grief, or did you not confront it?
So I remember that the first few times where I would just find myself uncontrollably like sobbing and like calling out and like talking to my dad who's not there anymore was probably like those first kind of waves of grief where there was no managing it anymore. And I remember just feeling so incredibly confused as to where a person can go. And excuse me, I'm getting emotional.
It's okay.
I grew up Christian, and so I always believed in an afterlife, and my dad was Christian, so he believed that he was going somewhere. But there's like this very real feeling that I had where I'm like, that might not be what happens. And if so, where does all that all that spirit, all that personality, all the memories, all the love, where does it go?
Yeah.
And the shared things that he and I had are now just mine. And how do I find a place for that when it was something that we carried together?
It's okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have a physical relationship and then have it severed and not know what is this new relationship, because it feels so one-sided.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me personally, I don't know if it's because I was adopted. I have had like an abandonment type thing in my past before. And so it did trigger that to lose him, because even though it's not like by his doing, but it feels like you're an orphan again. And yeah, it was really hard on my relationship in my marriage, because it was still together with my ex-husband in that time, and he didn't know how to handle and manage like someone who was dealing with so much distress. And I also, something that I regret is that in the week that in between when he passed and getting ready for the funeral, it was his birthday, my ex-husband's birthday coming up. And I prioritized his birthday during that funeral weekend. And I kind of made everything not about how I was feeling.
Right.
And I was like, go like do your stuff with your friends, like go have fun. I don't want my grief and my family stuff to keep you from being happy this week or whatever. And I really regret that, because I owed it to myself to expect that from him. So he ended up not really being there for me for the wake and the funeral. And it was something that he apologized for after the fact, but that definitely made it a lot harder because I felt even more alone.
It's like a double abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I bet that. Yeah. I will reserve any judgment on that situation. Because you deserve so much better than that. I'm just going to put that out there. But that must have been incredibly difficult, especially when that person is really supposed to be there for you in those difficult times.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what, like, I know that like tomorrow's never promised, and, you know, we might not see a next birthday, but, you know, birthdays can be celebrated a different day.
Yeah. Yeah. Things that we learn in hindsight.
Yeah, exactly. But you won't do it again. You'll
No.
remember that in the future. But I feel like in some ways, in many ways, I would have done the same thing, to be like, I'm fine. I can do this by myself. It's okay. Like, go have fun, when like, actually that's like really what I need.
Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Right. Yeah. Something very hard in life is to ask for help.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It's really hard.
I don't know. I obviously was not adopted, but I feel like part of something that I learned, like most probably like later in my life, and really in getting into a very close relationship, and I'm now engaged and owning my dogs, is that I did actually have like a little bit of a fear of abandonment. And not because I feel like my mom abandoned me, although like, as in, it wasn't her choice. She did not, like, you know, choose to die, obviously. But I definitely have like like the people closest to me died. Like the person closest to me like died. So like, if I get close to people, like they're going to die. And so it was a very like, I mean, I still definitely have like moments that's it's not like fully like resolved by any stretch of the imagination, but like that like really like freaks me out sometimes.
Yeah.
Is like just the thought of losing people that I love. I mean, like I literally will like be driving and think about my dog getting older and die and cry all the time.
Oh
Like
my
it's
gosh.
almost embarrassing how many times I'm like, she's fucking 8 years old and she's healthy as can be. Like, just relax.
Oh, I do the same thing with my cat. I'll take a video of her basically every day. I'm like, I'm gonna be glad when she's dead that I have this.
Yeah.
Should I stalk her when she's gone? Like,
and like I really I want to say that in a way it's like beautiful because I literally savor every moment, and like Saturday nights hanging out with my dogs are like my favorite fucking Saturday nights ever. Like, but it was really like when I started dating Nate, and like it was kind of from the beginning. It was just like we both kind of knew, and I was like, oh fuck, like now this is like someone I could lose. And when in previous like dating situations or really anything in my life, I'd be like, well, I already lost my mom, so like nothing fucking hurts like more than that.
Yeah.
And would kind of like brush it off. So when I was like very worried about losing this, it was like I just was like, I would almost like spin and do things that I'm like, I don't like, that is not who I am. Like, what am I doing?
yeah.
So I feel like in those moments, it's like, it's asking for help and just saying like, okay, I'm feeling like this because this has happened. And so I'm not intending to do this, or I need you to understand that when I do this, it's because of that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Help or support is really what we're asking for.
Yeah. Or just awareness, like, cause there's maybe not something for them to do. Like, especially, we talk all the time, like sometimes there's like literally nothing you can say.
But that is doing something, right?
But yeah.
Being
just
willing
listening.
to just sit and hold it with them and just say it's okay to feel your feelings. Cause like we're just like conditioned, and I think each gender is conditioned in different ways, but we're conditioned to not have emotion.
Yeah.
And to hold that in, which is why it's so much easier to be like, no, you do your thing. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then secretly we're like, no, I'm fucking spiraling and falling apart right now. And all I want is somebody to hold me.
Or
like,
if that you do
like,
show
fine.
emotions you justify or can explain and make it make sense to the other people so that somehow it's more valid. And in reality, you don't even know how you feel for so long. How can you put that into words?
Yeah.
Yeah. It literally took me like honestly, 20 years.
Yeah.
Like literally.
It took you until we did the podcast.
It took, yeah. No, like, some of it, but like I never had anxiety in my life. And it was like, now I have things that I'm so worried. It's not even like I so worried about losing is probably like the wrong phrase. Cause like, obviously one day, like we're going to die. And like, I know that, but there is like, those freak accidents or those things like that. Like, I just like, that is like, I am so worried about losing them that
of course
I like worry about everything. I'm like, oh my God, like the nail looks yellow. What?
Yeah.
and just generalized anxiety about everything.
I mean,
and it's never been the way.
It really I feel like it changed my brain chemistry. It really woke me up to just how real mortality is.
Yes.
And we are on this kind of ticking clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just going to go back to your point about like where we go, because I like when my mom died, like mom went to heaven, and I was raised Catholic. I would say I'm spiritual, but even lately I've had a similar thing. Like, what if they don't?
Yeah.
And like, where do we just like go in the ground? Like what? And I almost have to I'm almost like not ready to really think more about that. And I am just like, I think that heaven is something like for me that I like want to believe is truly there. Cause if it's not like, but like, there's just like too many questions that would go unanswered that I know that like I would need an answer to form like an opinion.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with that? Now, Melanie, you were talking about having to now hold the experiences that you both held at one point. Have you reconciled that? Have you redefined your relationship with your dad and with spirituality?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I was raised in the church, and so I was always around these belief structures, and it wasn't until he passed away that I really had to look at what I did believe and why I believe it. And I went through kind of like an arc of feeling very just anti-religious, and have come back to it a bit more in a more spiritual way than a structured, like organized religion way, because I realized that kind of what you said, Ashley, the benefit of being like, I want to choose this way of believing things. And I don't think that like I know, or any of us on earth can know what happens to us after we die. But what we have to hold on to, or what we can choose to hold on to, is the belief that it all means something. And that even if it's as simple as love that someone gave us in our lifetime is now ours to cherish and somehow pass and channel through to other people. If that's all that remains of that person, I think that in and of itself is a really beautiful thing.
Couldn't agree more.
And I'm okay with not needing answers, because it's a lot more about the meaning that we apply to what is happening around us.
Do you have a relationship with your dad now? A new relationship?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, wait, did you know that he died? Like, we've been talking about how he died.
Oh, your dad died. Oh, that's what we're talking about.
Shit. Is that
I
what
thought we
we've
were
been
talking about your dog. Okay.
Yeah. I thought this was one of our pet grief series. Yeah, no. And post-death, have you
I know
have you
what you meant
it?
now. Sorry. I was like, what the fuck, dude?
Yes, I really have. And a year and a half ago, I moved away from my hometown. I moved across country on my own and now live in San Diego, California. I was in New York. And in that time, I felt like that I kind of developed this like sense of taking him with me away from where we both lived and taking him somewhere new in my memories. And there will be times where I see something different that I haven't seen before, or just something really beautiful that's just a different landscape from what I grew up around, what he grew up around. And I think about how he would love to see it. Or sometimes I'll even just say like, you seeing this,
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
And things in terms of like nature usually make me feel connected to him. Also seeing dads with their kids always makes me feel that way as well. And my dad was very attentive, loving dad. He was very busy. I feel like he didn't have a lot of time for us, but when he did, he was very hands-on, and he made my childhood very happy. And so when I see other dads with their kids, I'm like, I feel, I don't know, that all kind of come back in that's
amazing.
Gratitude.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think part of my process of redefining my grief or coming to terms with it was that redefinition of the relationship that I had with Ariana. And it's only been probably this year, the beginning of this year, when it started to finally come together, where I was like, okay, she's with me.
Yeah.
In whatever sense that means, which is like personal to me. So it was like this coming back to some form of spirituality, or that energy, it's never destroyed. So there's something that's persistent. And once I was able to, at least in my mind, reconcile and settle into, she's still here, and maybe that means her memories, her energy, her love, like you mentioned, her lessons, the experiences we've had still exist within me. It really helped me to start to kind of move forward into like, okay, now I can take her into the new life that I'm going to have, right? Because it's like you mentioned, your family unit lost its identity, but I would venture to guess that you also lost your identity and had to, like you said, it changed your brain chemistry, and you have to re-figure out who the fuck are we in this loss. So for me, that's been like a huge cornerstone of being able to hold my grief and allow it to be something that generates love and attentiveness in my life.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you're able to do that with your dad as well.
Having a new kind of how we were talked about, like, where do they go? Like, not only where have they gone, but like, where do they go now is such like a big question of like, what room in the house of my life do you now occupy?
I like that.
And, you know, moving on through life without them is like continually adding something to that room. And I think it starts empty when you first lose them, but through time, you know, you add little things here and there.
I like that analogy.
I love that.
Have you sought any like mediums or spiritual advisors or anything like that to kind of tap into that, or no? It's something that seems to come up quite a bit.
So Chanel, who you had on the show, offered.
Oh, that's right. You're friends with her, right?
I'm friends with her, and I'm friends with Nicole.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Chanel has offered it to me.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten back to her about it because my dad was very not about those things. And I feel like there's a part of me that thinks that he would be annoyed or pissed off.
Imagine if he started it with like, why are you here, Melanie?
He's like, you know, I'm not about this stuff. Also, he's like a big napper. Like he would fall asleep everywhere. And I feel like he just doesn't want to be disturbed.
That's wild.
But maybe that's just, I don't know. I just feel like it's not his
fucking answer.
It's not on brand for him.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's so funny. It took me 3.5 years of a few people in my life, like telling me all the time to go, to finally, because I was similar. I was just like, I don't really know what I believe in that stuff, but I did. And it was an interesting experience. But it's funny you say that because my dad was an opinionated guy, kind of a gruff kind of guy. And that came through. And it was very much kind of like, what do you want? Is what he like came through. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm here. What do you want? And I was just like,
not even happy to hear from you. Just like I was sleeping.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Moving on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry I bothered you.
Yeah. It's so fucking fascinating.
I didn't realize that was the reaction from him.
The second person I went to, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not the first one, but the first one, he was like getting emotional, or at least the medium was saying he was. And then a couple of minutes later, he was like, "Your dad's not emotional, is he?" I was like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, he's saying that this is too much for him. He's done now."
I could see that though, from what I heard, like in his final days. You know, I feel like that's kind of fits.
Yeah.
It's good to know they don't lose their spice.
They don't.
Yeah.
Apparently
they're
they
the
don't.
same.
Yeah, they're the same.
But see, this is what makes me believe more. This is what makes me like more into like there is like heaven, and whatever heaven looks like, or whatever you define heaven as, like it doesn't need to be like it's with God. I just believe that there's something. Like, and like, I mean, I think religion can be a very good thing, and I think it can be like the worst fucking thing in this world. It depends on like how seriously you take it in, you know. But we're not here to discuss that. But I think that is like one of the things. Yeah, it's a whole other
podcast. That's not our
podcast. We'd have a lot of different views on that. But I feel like that is one thing I've never felt the need, the desire, I feel like I've gotten signs over my lifetime that tell me she's here, and are, you know, like I feel like someone would said like angel winks or God winks, or I don't know, something like that. Like I've gotten enough that it kind of just feels like
acknowledgements back to you.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just have never, I've never, and it also could be that I just like, I only had her in my life for 9 years. So I think that like going back to the point about like what life looks like without them is like so much of my life has been without them that I don't And my dad, like, I think was very good about always keeping her memory alive and, you know, was celebrating birthdays and celebrating angelversaries and, you know, like saying like, oh, your mom's here with you right now. Or, you know, like, so I think that there was enough of keeping her spirit alive and like, but not like overly done where like she didn't die.
Yeah. Right.
You know, because I think that there's like sometimes actually, I feel like we've only talked to people that are like dads in particular, it sometimes is, but moms, I think too, like they just like don't talk about the person and it's like, it didn't happen or like, you know, it just, you don't feel like you can talk about it because mom or dad is going to get upset. And I didn't feel that way. And like, I just feel like we went to like grief groups and, you know, I don't think I ever felt that we couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
So I feel like in that way, I feel like in that way, I never really wondered, you know, or I never had trouble with like the identity piece.
Yeah.
That way.
That's good.
Like my whole identity, my whole life is like, yeah, my mom's dead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that becomes
this is your origin
part of our
story.
identity.
Yeah. I'm like, she's dead, but I got a new one. like,
at least we didn't turn out to be a villain. Thank you for listening to this week's episode with Melanie. Stay tuned for part 2 on our next release. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.